Thank you for joining. We'll get started here in just a minute or so. Just waiting for others to join in. All right, let's go ahead and get started. Welcome to the What's New in Altium 365. My name is Christine Morris. I'll be your presenter today. We have quite a few things to get through, but before we get started, if you have any questions, you can type those in the Q&A panel, and there will be a recording made available to you as well, so you can kind of review that or pass that along to others that might be in your team as well. So I'm just going to jump right in because we have a few of them to go through and want to make sure we get your questions answered as well. So here in our Altium Designer, let me just go over to our What's New list. When you registered for the webinar, these are some of the items that we will be talking about. The assembly app that's been built into the web view now. We also have reuse blocks and snippets in the Altium 365. If you did attend our previous What's New webinar, you would have probably seen that as well there. But then we have our Gerbers and comparison of Gerbers in the web view as well. And we've added a new part choice management permission. So that's just to allow certain users or roles, if you're using the Pro or Enterprise, to be able to really define who can add part choices. And then our Draftsman has been added to our Altium 365 as well, which is in a beta mode. So we encourage your feedback there. And then we have our BOM compare that has been added also. And some productivity features and updates. There's a couple of them that might be unique and maybe help in some of the viewing capabilities when you are in your schematic or PCB view. And then at the end, we will go ahead and go through the MCAD CoDesigner 3.2 updates as well. So as you can see, many of things, but we'll start at the top of the list and we'll work through to the bottom. So I'm just going to go into my Altium Designer here, and I have my DVI level shifter project open. And to go into the assembly, I've already created the board. It's here and been added to the Altium 365 server previously. So in the design, you can see here under the beta, there is this assembly tab. And if we look at that a little bit closer, it allows us to step through each of the components in the assembly. And you can see the name, description, the quantities up above. You can group this list based on component or split it side by side, or either the assembled or 3D view. You also have filtering available. So if you know a specific component that you might be looking for, you can just type that in and it'll jump right to that. With that, if we start the assembly, just to show you how that's done, it will show you each of the component designators. Once you go ahead and click the done status symbol, it will allow you to progress to the next item in the list. And we have some navigation items down below. You can show the information about this particular, component there. You can also flip the view. If it was on the bottom of the board, you can go ahead and do that just by a click of a button. And it does zoom back into the location where you were. And we also have the navigation tool of the up and down arrows on your keyboard as well. So if you wanted to navigate that way and it's easier for you, most certainly can do that as well. And then we can skip. So if you didn't want to really go through and needed some more information maybe about that footprint or where that component is placed, you can skip it for the time being. And at any point you can go back to it and then go ahead and make sure that that is what you expect and go ahead and prove the done. But as you go through this whole list then, and it shows you how many more components you have to go through as well in the list. So that's kind of nice. You might have, thousands of components depending on the size of your board or the density. But with that being said, once you get to the bottom of the list, you can see that assembly now has been done, and you can reset the progress bar if you would like as well. If you want to go through them, or maybe a second person is reviewing, it's very, very handy in that regard. So that is our assembly app right within the Altium 365 web view. And if you did have comments, we love your feedback. You can see this little item here, and you can tell us, what you think about that capability. Kind of gives us some insight on how you're using the tools as well. The second item is the reuse blocks and snippets. And those are going to start here in the Altium Designer tools. And many of you are familiar with the snippets, of course. Maybe some time ago, you had already had those in place and using those frequently. Under our panels button, the design reuse item, this is our panel that's been revamped, and you can see any snippets that you've already went ahead and created. They would be in this list, and you can either save a snippet locally or to your Altium 365 server. It just depends. And here you can see the local one. In this list, if I were to go ahead and create a snippet, it's very easy. It's basically just going to be a right-click button, and you should see the snippet, or I might want to select, and then I should see my snippets here and create snippet from selected objects. You'll notice a dialog will appear, and I could say, this is my power 1 circuit if I wanted. And then I can either save it to my local folder or the Altium server. And if I go ahead and create that, it makes it very easy to go ahead and save then. And it would be stored in that location of where I chose. And if I needed, I could go back even in and see that. And here is that power 1 circuit, and I could go in, I could place that, I could add it as a sheet symbol, I can edit or delete it. So if I have that, I have it available right on my cursor, essentially. With that, we're going to go back in, and the reuse blocks are a little different because it does require both a schematic and a PCB elements to be in each of those documents, whether that is a net, whether that's a component, and it does open up the reuse block in my Altium Designer. So in the event that I had something already copied to my clipboard, I could use that. And when I go and open up my schematic sheet in the reuse block, then I would be able to go in and place that. Once it's placed, I will want to push that annotation, and I'll just do that quietly, and then update it through the engineering change order process as well. And that just ensures, that I have components, like I had said, or nets that are going to be part of the PCB document, because it will not allow me to save it to server if it's not. And the very last item is to save to server. I would change the name, and then I'd be able to see it. And I did notice I did have this issue earlier, and typically this is going to be an option that's available in a Pro and Enterprise subscription level. And I have my enterprise license that is enabled for Altium Designer, but that would be the last step that I would use, and that would be saved to the server. It will prompt me with a dialog box asking me to rename that particular reuse item. And let me just scroll over. I think that design reuse is here. And because I couldn't save it, it's not going to show up, but then I could go into those design reuse blocks. And this is that first one. That was the snippet that I just saved, but I would have that same functionality. So this is where you're going to create that new reuse block. You also have the availabilities of local or just the snippets folder, so you can see that in a view. You can search on them. If that list becomes very long, you would be able to do that immediately as well from here. And then you're filtering, of course. If you only want to see the reuse blocks that are saved, you can just click on that item and it will only show those. And at any given point in time, when you place those, as long as you're in a schematic document, you would be able to, place that reuse block. And you can even place it as a sheet symbol if you would like, if that's more convenient for the design style, or go in and edit or even delete it from this list if it's no longer needed. So really, really nice way of getting those blocks, you know, not only as a snippet that you can save, but also a reuse item that has a schematic and the PCB elements tied together. So, and my apologies, I couldn't go ahead and save that to the server. I'll need to look into that a little bit further. But our next item on the list is the compare Gerber files in the Altium 365. And I'm just going to go in, and I have this COMI project that has already been, again, added some of the sample documents. So if you really want to test this out and you don't have a design, you can go in, just log in, open up the project either in the Altium 365 server or from your Altium Designer, as I'm doing here. And what we'll do is we'll go into the history. And this history is really nice, and it accommodates us in a lot of ways because our designs are always version controlled in Altium 365. But one of the options that are new is if I go in here, I will be able to go ahead, and I need to go into a release. You'll notice these are just the commits, meaning that I saved items, but I didn't do a formal release through the project releaser itself. Those are here in this color here, down in the red color. And if I go ahead, you'll notice I have an extra item that I can pick a release. And I'll go ahead and I will choose to select my release, and I'm going to use the A9 version. Just to show that there is a comparison, and all I need to do is click on that version, and then it'll bring me into the comparator where I would be able to see items that are compared. And this is the Gerber. So mind you, you'll notice here that my A15, and it's kind of hard to depict, you know, I'm zoomed into this area, but because it's not layered on top of the comparison for the differences, I just see the actual trace that is there. And I'll show you the A9, and this looks like a little wider compared to the other one. It looks like it's a shorter width of that trace. But on the left hand side, you also have the comparison. So if I were to look at this, it's numbered for each one of the differences there. And you would be able to then really able to identify where they are. And if you zoom in closely, you can see there are changes on the original one to what the A9 version compared to what it is in A15. And you can even do, you know, point-to-point measurements here, which is really nice. And it will tell you exact distance. If I wanted to measure, you know, where is that distance and have that displayed, I can do that in the web view as well. Not only that, you have information about the controls. If you're not sure how to navigate in the Altium 365, you can always come here for the information. Or if I want to change the units from millimeters to mils, I can do that as well. So your measurements are more accurate. But then again, you have these different areas that you can see individual items that are in comparison. And it gives you a full running list, and you can do the comparison with as many design, you know, releases that you may have, depending on, you know, what that source is that you're choosing. You know, modifications may be slight or they may be very vast. So you want to make sure that you're choosing those appropriately when you go in initially and select what Gerber files you want to do the comparison for. The next item is the part choice management permissions in the Altium Designer as well. And I'll just close out some of these sheets since we're not using them anymore and it gets a little busy, kind of distracting. And I'm going to go into my preferences. And here in my data management, under my servers category, I have this operations. Again, this is going to go into the pro subscription and enterprise subscription to be able to see this operation. So if you log into your Altium Designer and you do not see it, it's probably due to your subscription level. And here in the operations is where we will see that part choice management item. And where this becomes very valuable, it has been requested by a lot of customers. And it's essentially because if you have a component and maybe that supply chain is, changed abruptly in a short period of time, but maybe you have, designs out in production, or maybe they're out in the field already. You may not want to update that part choice unless that design is at a state of maybe being a new revision, because that can again impact those that are in the field. So you might want to go ahead and choose who should be being able to update part choice management capabilities, just due to the impact that it might have down the line. In this case, you can add any additional collaborator or as a role or even a user. If I wanted to add in addition, maybe I have, suppliers. And let me just see if I have those as a role in here, and I do. So maybe I want to add that group and apply them. So only those that are part of those roles then would have access to change the part choices on any given component. And all I need to do is do an apply and OK, and then that would be set from that point forward. So again, really helps, especially for those individual roles, and to limit the permissions for the general user, to be able to modify those. The next item in our list is the Draftsman view in the Altium 365. For those of you that have used the Draftsman, it's primarily for documentation purposes of your design. And what's nice is we have all these different views and all these elements that we can produce from the PCB document, and it's updated automatically when any changes are saved. And what's nice about that is here is the Draftsman view, and this is an assembly view, but we also have it for fabrication. And you can see here, this is just the bottom and top view, but I've added another side view, and a scaling that can be put in, a drill table. And just to give you an idea of what you can place, here is a long list of items. You can even have additional views that you can bring in here. The Draftsman document has been a really great document that has been added to the Altium Designer for quite some time now, but it's just now being able to be viewed in the Altium 365. So again, I'm going to go back in because this is already available, and I'm just going to close out a couple of these tabs because it does get quite busy as they are launching in for the browser view. But here you can see, this is that Draftsman tab. So if I go in here, I will be able to see not only the first sheet, but if I use this little drop down arrow, I can see the second sheet as well. And I can make comments to whatever I need within. You can see I can search on nets or components in it. I can also have the information just like I had in the previous previews, but I can download if I've been given permissions, of course, for the project. And here, if I want to place a comment, and maybe I want to just say, to my engineering group, I want to have them check the scale of this particular, item that I've placed. I can assign it as a task if I would like, or I can just generally post it. So anyone in that engineering group then would know and be notified that they have that. But at any given time, I can come in here, I can convert to a task, I can edit, I can delete, I can even copy a link or resolve this. And maybe these comments might even get a little too busy in my Draftsman document. I can make that visibility turned off for them as well. So anyone that was in that, they would be able to see that comment, and even in the Altium Designer, and be able to act on that as an action, to go ahead as part of my design process. So really excited to have the Draftsman. It's been requested. It's probably one of the higher numbers, I would say, for request of features to come in and be able to be viewed within the Altium 365 server. So If you haven't used those, I highly recommend add a Draftsman document to the project that you're working on, or open one that is in part of the sample data and just kind of preview. And what's nice about it is we even have filtering, you know, just tasks or assignments here that you can isolate if you only want to see, you know, what has been included, you're included in as well. And that's all in that commenting view here in the web view as also. The one other thing while I'm here, I'll go to the next item, which is our BOM compare. And just going back into the history, similar to what we did with the Gerber view, we have the same option available. And you can see here in the BOM review, that's a little different because we can choose any particular design that we want and compare against. It doesn't have to be a formal release. So here, if I select this one and maybe I go into, you know, maybe this one here, I can choose that for December 6th. And what it will do is it does a side-by-side comparison, just like it did for the Gerber files. And it will show me those differences once it goes ahead and opens up. So we'll let this finish up here. And it's also color coded. So that makes it really, really nice. And here it is. So here is a comparison, and you can see these are any added items would appear in green. And you can see over on this side, this item has been modified. They are modified design items. And you can see this is the color coding depicting that they are modified as well. So you have all three of those in that range. As far as the removed items, there aren't any listed, or the added items. They would be all here, either above or below those if they were added or removed items. But if I click into each one of these, you'll notice this is pretty much the active BOM data that is right from the design of this COMI_FMU board and the December 1st one, and that's what it's checking against. Everything within that BOM, it's doing a comparison, and anything that's changed will be in this comparator tab for me to review. So really, really nice. And if you're needing, you know, any of these functionalities, just to kind of go ahead and pick through them, this is a one centralized location to go in and view everything. So we're excited to have the BOM compare now available as well. Going into our next item are our productivity feature updates. So here I'll just go back into this design and we'll go into a schematic. I'll just open this up to expand. And if I have a schematic open, I can go ahead and I can click on any given net, and I would be able to, if I'm in my search, I could even search on a net or select one independently, and it should show up and cross probe into my PCB document as well. There we go. It highlighted. I was waiting for it to highlight. I think I was just a little impatient there. But when you have a net, you can see all the various items about it from this schematic tab, the PCB tab. I can click right from this view and it will isolate it in it once it's rendered and go into that exact zoom level that I was in the schematic. Previously, I'd have to search that net again from the search criteria and then zoom into the area. Now we keep that as part of the functionality that you can see. And if you're in that 3D view or in the PCB view, you can use the tabs up above or the ones that are here, but you can see also the layers. Now, if we go ahead and we just click in here, and I'll just clear that filter by clicking out of this item, but you can see here, if these are turned on, it will display that as the top layer now. So before we were only able to, you know, turn and enable on and off, but now we can select any given layer that's turned on to view, and it will become the forefront of what is visual here within the screen. And it really helps if you have, you know, a lot of items you're checking against. You can quickly go in and go in and out of those layers by just clicking the checkbox on the left-hand side. And you can even use your plus and minus keys if you have those to navigate as well on your keyboard. And those, just using those, it kind of shows you the detail. And I'm just going plus and minus so I can see those in its entirety. And it will go and step through those one by one as I go down that list. And you can see here's kind of the key code down at the bottom in case you forget, you know, what that shortcut key is when you're trying to navigate. You also have the view of the stack up. And if you haven't seen this yet, this is grand as well. If you were kind of doing a, say, a design review or anything that needed, you know, special attention, you can see that right here in the web view also. Even though the productivity items are here, I just want to show that because you could place a comment and that would then go out to the entire team as well. So that's just within our 3D view here within the Altium 365 server. Or I should say that was a 2D view. This is the actual 3D view. But all those capabilities still exist, and each of the tabs is just a matter of how you want to navigate about them. And by clicking this, obviously, you can turn that back on. It's very, very similar to our view panel within the Altium Designer. So nice and easy way of navigating. So those are a few of the new productivity feature updates, I'll say. And just so you know, when you're turning on and off these layers, it does not impact the physical PCB itself. It's more of a visual view here. So when you turn them off, it's not turning them off in the entire design, or it's not impacting the physical design. It's strictly in the UI of the Altium 365 that is allowing that visual view. So of turning on and off. The last thing that I have on our list, I kind of went through that quite fast today, but is the MCAD CoDesigner, the 3.2 features. And what I'm going to do for that one is I am going to go into my Altium Designer, and I'm just going to collapse this, and I can close out this because we're not using that any longer. And I'm going to open up a project. Click the wrong button there. I'm just going to open up one of our sample projects again. And so you can follow along or do this in your own spare time as well. But when I go into the PCB dock and I open up this PCB board, we have a fold and unfold item that is available to you right within. We've always had it in the Altium Designer, but now we have it in the actual web view as well. So, but this is the document, and I must have opened up the BOM document. That's why it was taking so long. My apologies. Let's just open this one. Let me close that out. So those of you that have not seen the folding, here I'll just go back in to the PCB panel, and once that's open here, I'll go into the layer stack region. I'm going to go into the 3D view. And notice on my screen, when I go ahead and use this slider, it allows me to see if I go in and rotate this slightly, you'll be able to see that particular folding mechanism in 3D. And this has been available in the 3D mode with the bend lines for quite some time. However, it is in the Altium CoDesigner, and I've already pushed across, and I want to make sure that I am connected here, because when I go in and out of the web view, a lot of times it will require me to log back in because we are using SSO, single sign-on. So I want to make sure that it's visible. And at this point, it looks like this design, I have it there because I was able to open it, obviously, in my project. And if I go ahead and I save that to the server, I can do so. But instead of showing it here, since we already have it open, I'm going to open it in the mechanical tools so you can see it there as well. And if I go in, because it's a sample project, to my SolidWorks tools, what I am going to do is I'm going to go ahead and use my credentials for SSO. And just go in here and sign in. Because again, that is supported in our MCAD CoDesigner as well. So when you sign in here, you will see in the SolidWorks tools and also in PTC Creo, the fold line. And this should have signed me in. Let me go in. And let's just make sure. There it is. It's going to load. It just wasn't open in the browser. So now I should be able to go back in. And it did sign me in, hopefully. Yes. And this is the same server I was working in. So if you aren't familiar with the CoDesigner, you will need to download the plugin from the Altium website first in order to use the CoDesigner features. But if I go ahead and pull in this particular design, and it is the IMU, and go ahead and let this build. It's going to ask me what variant, and I'm sure it's the default. It'll save the assembly because we work in part files and assembly files when we come into the SolidWorks. But now you can see when I open this up and it starts to build, it has a fold and unfold button. So this ribbon panel has been built in for ease of use. And if anyone hasn't already, use this within their mechanical tools and you're not collaborating with those individuals in that team, I highly recommend. It's an easy push-pull without having to export design files, IDF, STEP, and so forth. You can push and pull right from the server of the Altium 365 into your mechanical tool. And it's going to give us the ECAD X and Y planes for the origins, and for components we have those as well. But you'll notice here as I navigate, and just let me turn this, we have some boards and components. And if I zoom in, this is that folded state, but I can unfold it now as well. So before, this is a new item that's been added just to allow you to visualize what that is going to look like when it's in its folded state. And then you can look at those bend lines, anything that needs to be modified, you would be able to see that also in your mechanical tool, just like you did in the Altium Designer. One other thing that I want to demonstrate for you is we have a new mode. So in the event that you did not push, and I did not push through the MCAD CoDesigner here in the panel, but we have another mode that is called demo mode. And in the event that you did not have an electrical engineer, but you still wanted to experiment with the actual design flow, we have a demo that you can actually pull in design data. And I need to type in, and I'm just going to close out this particular design, and I'm going to log in with my other credentials here. And it is a different login that I have, so I'll just type that in quickly. The one thing that is requirement for the demo mode is that you have a login that doesn't have a workspace already associated with it. So if you have a login that's an Altium 365 login that already has a workspace that you've been using, you would have to log in or register with a different credential. And I'll show you where that is in just a moment so you can see where you would register for that so you can actually experiment as well. And that's this registration link right down here. So I'm going to sign in. And because these credentials don't have the SSO associated with it, it didn't kick me back in to allow me to enter my email address. But you can see this is what the demo view would look like if you're wanting to just pull in a design, and you have settings here, just like you would in the normal MCAD settings to build that 3D geometry. And if I click on the pole, here, you'll notice it allows me to define keepouts, rooms, add a mechanical enclosure, build out the copper, geometric shape of the copper, and all the associated items. All I need to do is click on the pole, and you'll notice this design, once it's available, I can go ahead, select it by just clicking on it. It's the USB Bluetooth dongle. And I'll allow that to save just like my other design. I'm going to replace this assembly. And what it will do is start building out the tree. So then I can use all of the features up here, or I even now have the ability to pull in extra designs because, or excuse me, extra changes. And I'll wait for this to create and do a second pull so you can see it bring in the copper elements as well. And what it does is it's a great preview because what it's doing is it's logging into the Altium 365, but it has a design or a project that's already been set up that you can work with, so you don't have to push from the electronic side or the Altium designer side to actually experiment with, you know, these features that are in your mechanical tool. And there isn't any support for Fusion 360 or Siemens NX for the copper. So if you are collaborating in those tools, just be mindful of that for the actual demo mode. And while we're waiting for this, one other feature of the 3.2 is we now have support for the PTC Creo version 9 as well. So we're just let this finish. So that was one of the other things that are really important in this 3.2 release. And to use this demo mode, you would probably have to update whatever release version you have currently, but notice there's new changes detected. So that allows the individual to go ahead and pull those, because now I pulled it initially, and see the variations. And it's going to give detailed information about each of these. And it's also going to add the top and bottom solder here when I bring it in. And if I do an apply, I can even uncheck those. If I didn't want to bring in everything, maybe there's some items that I want to reject, I can also select those and it will give me a reject, and I can put a comment in of why I rejected those. And what's nice about that is there's a full running history of not only the things that have been accepted, but also rejected and by whom. And when we open this back up, I'll be able to show that in the panel once this preview is available. And not only that, we'll also kick it into the Altium 365 server. So the web view, we can see it additionally from our mechanical tools. Now we can prompt into the Altium 365 web view, just like all of our other features that we have presented today. So really great functionality that's been added, and it's really coming in at a very fast pace. So that's why we kind of started these What's New webinars, to keep you, up to speed with what has changing, because that's coming in so quickly. We want you to adapt those features. And of course, if you have any questions, you can reach out to us at any given time, and we're glad to get those answered along the way for you as well. And we're just letting this build out. And for the copper, as you can imagine, the copper geometry, it does take just a second longer. But now we can see this. And if I were to look at it, and if I go in and zoom in, you can even see any of these items. And if I want to go in and say, for example, in the tree, I can even hide that board. Let's just go into my tree here. And on the board, if I hide that, I would be able to see that physical copper all the way through the pads and everything. So it really does depict that view. And not only that, you can see even the mask. If I rotate this slightly, you can see the mask for the solder mask cutouts. So pretty great view within, and this is just the demo view again, but I have all the same functionality that I would. The only exception is I don't need to rely on that ECAD person to demo the tool and see if it's a good fit. So any of those. And the one last thing I will show, and then we'll open it up for questions, is I'm going to open it in the web view as well. And here it's going to ask me for those credentials, and those are the same ones that I logged into before. Close out some of these other items that I had open. And this is the view that you're going to see. And this is that particular design that was already saved to the server, so I didn't have to push that. But if I go into the 3D mode, This is exactly that same exact board now, and I have the same capabilities. You know, I can comment on things. I can search for nets if I wanted. I have it all available right here in the web browser view. So you can see how valuable that might become when you're on the mechanical side. And if you're, you know, ECAD person, maybe they're not available, or maybe you don't even have one. Maybe you are the same, you know, person that's doing both roles for mechanical and electrical. It gives you a facility that you can actually demo the product, see it here in real life, and then, you know, figure out if that's something that you want to introduce to your team members as well. But all those capabilities, you know, you can just rotate, see what's on the back side, the thickness and so forth is going to be available. And even in the PCB, you know, you can see those layers because this board was fully developed and brought into the Altium 365 server as a project. And when you're logged in here, if you go back, you know, this is where if you were logged in and you didn't know where to navigate from this, if you get to this screen, you just go in here and open it again. And if you want to collaborate with someone, you can share. You can even share from this button in the upper right corner. So then they can collaborate with you, maybe viewing the different documents and so forth, or doing the commenting back and forth. So you can see that from the MCAD perspective as well. And the one last thing that I will show here is this running history, because we had talked about this earlier. You can see it will show me this was an ECAD side that was from an electrical engineer. And this was my login as of today at 11:33 a.m. The poll actions that took place, all changes were accepted. If anything was rejected, it would show down below as well. But that's going to be that running list of all the items. Anything that is in a board area, if you're doing a cutout or a keep out, would be here. If you've added an enclosure to this particular design, you would just click the enclosure in the feature tree and then the button, and it will say it was successfully added, and then that name of whatever the enclosure name is in your feature tree would show up here, and it would have a green box saying that it's been added. So it allows you to really see the tool in its entirety just through a demo mode process. So that's all I had. I don't want to take up all of your time because I would like to leave it open for questions at this point. But we appreciate your attendance. If you have to leave, if you do have any questions, please feel free to type those in. And just to remind you, you will receive a recording later on today or maybe early tomorrow of this as well that you can pass along to your team members or maybe review it if need be as well. Thank you again for your attendance. We really appreciate it. Hopefully you have some of these items and you can go in and start using them. And if you haven't created a workspace, I highly encourage you to go ahead and do that as well, because I think you can take advantage of some of these new features that are coming in. I'll just sign back into my Altium Designer since I have been in and out of the tool here. And it did go ahead and reconnect, which is great. All right. I don't see any other questions, so I encourage you come back again soon. We'll be running these particular webinars weekly, or not weekly, I shouldn't say, regularly, and when new features become available. We appreciate your attendance, and if you have any questions about the features, please reach out to us as well. We look forward to helping you be successful in the Altium 365 platform. Bye-bye.